100% grass-fed beef and pastured chicken and pork for CSAs, farmers markets, restaurants, and fresh stop markets. Adam manages 12.5 acres of vegetables annually and works to implement systems across the 260-acre farm that continually improves soil. Prior to coming back to the family farm, he spent time working and learning on market farms in Georgia, Tennessee, and southern Kentucky. He's passionate about building healthy, re-mineralized soil as a way to improve the land, grow amazing vegetables, and combat pressures of extreme weather events. He has explored and implemented various methods for mitigating the challenging soils on his family farm. So, Adam, thank you so much for being here, and I'll let you go ahead and share your screen.
All right. Thanks, Brooke. Yeah, I'm Adam Barr, and I'm going to share my screen here so you can see my PowerPoint, hopefully. And I was already checking on the chat there. Hopefully I can continue to look at that. I didn't see anybody who had a fragipan soil type, which is what the question is about. And I'm going to get into all the details about what a fragipan is and why it's difficult for us. There were a lot of other soil types. Silt loam is pretty common. And it looked like people were dealing with a variety of issues, including erosion control and just maybe depleted soils, which we're all farming depleted soils. So I really want to look forward to getting into that with everyone, because I'm not an expert in climate change. I'm not an expert in soils. I am mostly just an expert in our farm and what we do here. I'm going to briefly talk about our farm, our market channels, and how we scaled up, because that was relevant to the discussion of climate change. We were scaling up as we were seeing increased climate challenges. And then I'm going to go into some of the mitigating practices that we use, and hopefully we can all share at the end of that in a discussion about what you all are doing on your farms, because everyone is an expert in on what they're doing on their land. So this is just our version of mitigation practices, and I just wanted to be clear about that. Before we begin, I just wanted to say we are on traditional native land of the Osage, Sioux, and Quapaw peoples. Whenever my wife Ray, who is my business partner and wife, whenever we do a presentation, we want to start out by saying we acknowledge that this is not our land originally, and we would like to recognize the native communities that are here and have been here historically and continue to be here, and stewarded the land before we arrived. That's not just in passing either. Some of the mitigation technique that we'll talk about actually has deep roots in native land management. So it's an opportunity for healing on our farm. And also, I think just the bigger conversation in agriculture needs to lead with this particular topic. Next slide here. So yeah, I already kind of did an overview. Maybe I should have had that slide up. Won't go too deep into that overview. Just our farm in general. We're a 7th generation family farm. We're in Rodelia, which is Breckenridge County, near the Meade County line. We farm on lands that are native to the Osage and Shawnee and Cherokee peoples. We do raise 100% organic produce, 100% grass-fed beef, pastured chicken, and pork on a 270-acre family farm. Our mission statement is that we believe in healthy food, healthy people, and healthy community. Everything we grow is raised with love and care to ensure best quality nutrition for our customers and to take care of the soil and the land for the next 7 generations. So yeah, we've been certified organic on the vegetables since 2014. This is our current farm. We've been direct marketing those vegetables for about 14 years, currently producing on about 15 acres. We raise pastured poultry and hogs. We have no local organic feed source right now, but we are working with a neighbor who has converted his corn crop to a non-GMO. So we are not certified organic on our livestock. It's kind of a split certified operation. Our grass-fed beef is 100% grass-fed. And we do have perennial plantings on the farm. There's a 3/4 acre home orchard, a couple acres in mixed perennial production, and an 1.5 acres that is a combination of perennial and annual production. So organic veggies is the mainstay of our business model. It is 2/3 of our farm income. We focus on the high value crops when we can: greens, microgreens, strawberries, turmeric, ginger. There's a pile of ginger. There's a CSA share because our primary market channel, as you'll see on this slide, is through our CSA. This is a 2019 info about our market outlets. And yeah, CSA is a predominant sales channel for us. We also use farmers markets, which is a CSA distribution site for us, restaurants and wholesale and fresh stops. And when I update this for 2020, just because of COVID, we'll have to note that the blue Pac-Man there of CSA ate the yellow piece of pie. The restaurants and wholesale part just disappeared for us, as I'm sure it did for a lot of you farmers. Yeah, our customized CSA share is both vegetables and meat. We have 2 separate shares that we sell separately. We use a Harvey platform, and it allows for fully customizable CSA share. We have different sizes, different frequencies. The members are able to swap items in and out of their boxes, and all the management on my end is pretty straightforward. I just put what we have available and what we make available to our CSA members into the system, and the members' boxes, all that's automated and up to the member's choice. And then it spits out a pick list for me when we're ready to go to the field with it. And then we get individual labels for individual box packing. I mentioned also we did farmers markets, but New Roots is a market channel for us, which is one of the smaller market channels, but it's really important to us. The organization rooted in food justice, and there's 2 other farms, Rootbound Farm and Valley Spirit, who are supplying New Roots in the Louisville fresh stops, which if you don't know about them, I won't go too much detail. They're a great organization. Highly recommend checking it out. So yeah, to go back in time a little bit before we got to our current production model, which I just described, the early version was about 7 years of me figuring out how to produce on this farm and what it was like to have a direct marketing operation. So we had small scale, 2 to 3 acres of vegetables. And our early goal was to produce all the fertility here on the farm because we had the cattle and the poultry to produce the compost. But the problem we had is we didn't know how to make good compost. We had the beef cattle production. So we had winter feeding area. We had pastured poultry production. This is our brooder house. It's been updated since then, pretty primitive in this case, but we also got compost out of that. We were making a static pile though, for those of you familiar with compost. We were piling it up and stirring it up every now and then, and not following necessarily National Organic Program regulations. So we were having to spread it as manure rather than spreading it as compost. And we failed pretty good at it. We did not produce a good compost in the last several years when we were testing it. It was high in aluminum. The nutrient profile was super variable. It was not going to be the foundation of a great vegetable production system. We use it in our orchard, but this is us spreading in the home orchard in the off season. But we still had this business model and this idea that we could scale up so that my wife, Ray, could work full-time for the farm as well as I was, and that we could raise our family here. We have 3 young kids. The oldest is 7, and the youngest is going to be 3 here in another week. And so when we started scaling up in 2015, we were really focused on living here on the farm full-time and producing so that we could make a middle-class living, which we kind of defined as, $40,000 or $50,000 a year. I thought at the time, I think we were planning to scale up the business because we had the opportunity. Our family farm is 270 acres. It's co-owned by my father, myself, and my uncle. Family land, there's shared tractors and some equipment. So we had this opportunity. We saw the CSA markets growing as well and thought we could get into wholesale. And yeah, the pressure's there. We started a family and we wanted to increase and stabilize our income. Challenge, of course, of scaling up. The main one we focused on initially was the capitalization part, which leads to debt in a lot of cases, which we did take on. We did some business planning and made investments, though. That's how we looked at it. We Worked with K-Card. If you're in Kentucky, hopefully you know about K-Card. If you don't, Google them. They do offer free business planning for farms, and they're amazing. We worked with Farm Credit Mid-America, which does have a small beginning farmer lending program, so we could get a loan for a packing shed, and FSA as well. And then also we did community-based financing with Slow Money and a local bank, and social media campaign to get Kiva Zip loans. So we were going from this model at the top left up here, which is, digging carrots by hand. Worked great at the scale we had it at. We had some interns for help for labor. And we were scaling up to where we were mechanically cultivating carrots and digging them with a bed lifter. The idea was, we were packing these vegetable shares in the first 7 years on our carport. Family right there doing it with us, and we were scaling up, needed a proper pack shed with all the bells and whistles. Going from a farm truck to an actual delivery vehicle, you get the idea. Hand transplanting to a water wheel transplanter, and then we were doing tillage from the beginning, mostly with a walk-behind tractor, but we were also making raised beds with that walk-behind tractor, and there's a root washer. The point here is 2015, we were looking towards the future. We had entered into this new paradigm where we were not small-scale growers. We were trying to get to a mid-size, because where we are now, we're still relatively small in terms of agricultural size, but we were trying to get a little bit bigger beyond the market garden, and things were looking up. That's my picture of looking up. So now I'm going to go into soils on Barr Farms because it's relevant to how the first 5 years or so has gone of this scale up. Yeah, when you do our soil map, we're on 2 different properties here, with the predominant soil type being the Sadler silt loam, and the secondary soil type being a Zanesville silt loam. So the only difference between these two is that one is on a 3 to 5% slope, and the other is on a 6 to 12% slope. And the Zanesville, we don't farm very much on the Zanesville because it does have so much of a slope. This is our home base and the original gardens, and then that's in yellow, the original gardens, and then the pink is where we were expanding as we needed more land for vegetable production. So yeah, just doing a soil survey. This is a look at the Zanesville. It is an eroded soil type, as I mentioned. I highlighted some things here because you can pull these out of the USDA's web soil survey, which is online, or there's also one with, I believe it's, I can't remember if it's California State or where, but there's some good soil surveys out there. Our soil profile in the top 24 inches is awesome. It's a silt loam. There's a decent amount of clay, but it's good ground. It's got high phosphorus, calcium, and it's got a balanced magnesium and calcium ratio, but it does have low organic matter. And the reason it has low organic matter, most of the farms around us can't get up above 2%. And us as well. I mean, it's an eroded soil type because of this fragipan. Now, fragipan is a restrictive soil horizon that stops water movement and root growth. I'm not talking about rock. I am not exactly talking about clay either. It's a special type of clay. It's a marine clay that blew in thousands of years ago and sealed up a layer, in our case, at about 24 to 40 inches, where there is no root penetration and there is very little water penetration. If you look down here, sorry, yeah, my notes say WTF, the capacity of the most limiting layer to transmit water, that's the percolation of this soil type, is about 0.1 inches per hour, which is 10% of most soils. So if you're on a karst soil, which a lot of Kentucky is, you may have eroded soil, that's one problem, but your soil probably drains downward. Ours does not drain downward. So our water table is way up here, 19 to 28 inches. And that makes it creates the converse problem, which is we have a low storability of water. So because the roots only go down to 28 inches, let's say, then once the water table drops below that 28 inches, there's no penetration of the roots, and there's no ability to get to that water below there. Yeah, it's a challenge. There's a lot of studies actually out of University of Kentucky in the Princeton farm about this type of soil. You can see this is a look at the topsoil layer, and then the fragipan is here. There's these gray streaks in the ground. And this is actually where the soil has gone anaerobic for a long period of time. And it's pretty dead at that level. You can see where the roots go down and then they stop right here at the gray clay. That gray clay is extremely hard once you pull it out. If you pull it out of the ground and dry it out, it's not just clay, it sets up like concrete. The old timers around here had a nickname for it as petrified whale shit. I mean, it's kind of crude, but it's not really that far off. It is a marine type of clay, and it does get petrified when it dries out. So fragipans are a limiting factor, but it's a huge amount of soils in the United States. There's 12% of the lands have some form of fragipan. We particularly have a pretty bad one, but all these areas that you see here, which is a lot of Kentucky, have some form of fragipan. Now, it may not be extremely restrictive on karst ground. You can see there's not hardly any of it here in eastern Kentucky, but there's soils like this all over the Ohio River Valley. So, take the soil type we had and the expansion we did onto new ground, but also throw in some climate change effects, which we're all dealing with. So our climate in the Ohio River Valley is, we get a little bit of everything. I would say that the patterns I see emerging and that I think the data back it up, is there are wetter than average entire years, but especially summer time for us, it seems. The microbursts happen, which, bring in huge rain events, 3 to 7 inches. That seems to happen. I'm just throwing out every 6 months. It happens often. You can imagine what 3 to 7 inches of rain will do on a soil that only percolates at 0.1 inches per hour. And then occasionally we have unexpected dry spells, which is just impossible to predict. We've had them in winter, the spring, summer, of course, fall. October, which has been a traditionally dry month, can be the driest on record, but it's also, we had the wettest October on record in the last, I think that was 2 years ago now. Oh, wait, I didn't mean to go that far. Yeah, so the big question the big difference we made in 2015 till now is we've increased the amount of tillage on our farm. For sure, we have had a much larger impact, and everyone familiar with organic agriculture knows the impact of tillage on the farm. But when you factor in huge rain events, then the lack of percolation and a little bit of flat ground, you end up with dead zones. You can see here, this is a field we couldn't get into for weeks at a time. There are beets in the background here, and you can just tell where the water sits, even in these raised beds, the beets aren't growing. We didn't cultivate this whole area, and the beets just died out. This was a rough time. It was fun for our son Cedar to play in, though. This is onions on raised bare ground. Again, you see it's not too bad there, but the water still pools, as you can tell, and it doesn't go away. That's the problem with the fragipan. So our major troubles are, these record-breaking rain events. We had 6 inches in 2015 and an early dry crops with major crop loss. 2016, 7 inches in late July, major crop loss. And we had, before this transition, we had sworn that we didn't want to use any plastic culture at all. But in 2017, we started a demonstration project. UK was still doing a demonstration project for farmers who wanted to try plastic culture, and we did a few acres as a transitional mitigation strategy. So yeah, 2018, 2019 are still, there's records happening left and right. Everybody sees that. It was the warmest July. 2018, 2019 didn't want to be outdone, so it was the warmest July and the warmest start to October. And then September 2019 was the warmest, or the driest month on record. It might have been outdone in 2020. I haven't updated it yet. We were doing these raised beds, and we were trying to cover crop as much as possible. But as you can see, it's just a lot of tillage. So our mitigation practices, I will go into these now. There's 4 primary ones I want to talk about. The main problems that we're trying to address, there's too much water, there's maybe not enough water. On our soils, I make the point here that it's much easier to bring in water for us and irrigate than it is to remove water from the field. And then this hot temperature question, that's really, I think the data is showing an increase in the low temperatures. So soil temperature rising, but also the low air temperatures are the what's going up the fastest, which is it's not cooling off at night as much, and that hurts things for sure. So our first practice is we've been using biochar in our fertility inputs since about 2017 now. So yeah, biochar, what is it? Biochar is not just charcoal. It is charcoal that has been activated and has biology in it. So in our case, it's coming from lump charcoal plant in Tennessee. This is something that they produce for the charcoal market, and then they have these fines that we get on our farm and on the farm where we buy compost from. And it's used in crop production, in animal production as bedding. It's a way to go, well, carbon negative. It's a way to decrease your carbon impact, because that charcoal in the ground has an extremely long lifespan. It's able to stay there for years and years and have benefit over the very long term. And as you're making charcoal, there's the possibility you're able to produce heat and electricity from it. So it's just extremely interesting. The last 10 years has shown this explosion of interest and scientific data on biochar. I've just scratched the surface of this, I believe, and there's a lot of things that are coming on. Thatcher has a publication. So this is just to get a good definition of it. So biochar is a potentially valuable soil amendment produced from biomass through pyrolysis. Pyrolysis is driving off the gases in organic matter and burning those off, but retaining the carbon ring structure so that that part does not burn. That part that's left is the charcoal part. So then when you take that biomass and you use it in your composting operation, the biology comes into this charcoal, these rings. It's a stable soil matrix, like the hotel. Charcoal is a hotel with nobody in it. What you want is to fill your hotel up with good microbes so that you can improve soil aggregation, enhance nutrient and water holding capacity, and provide habitat for microorganisms, for soil organisms. And it may stabilize soil organic carbon. That's something that really interests me, actually. I'll move on from that. That's just pictures of charcoal. You can see, I think there's some crazy statistics about it having, 1 gram has a mile of surface area or something like that. Again, you can go really deep on this, and I don't have time to go too deep on biochar. I don't want to take up my whole time, but it is fascinating to me. It absorbs nutrients, especially nitrogen. That's the one point I'll make there. And why do we know about biochar? Well, the original stewards of the Americas, and it turns out I watched Lee Penniman's presentation here on African contributions to organic agriculture and soil, and biochar was being made on all the continents, it appears. What was been studied recently is the Terra Preta in the Amazon rainforest. So these are archaeological sites in black, and then these are yellow spots are a high density of anthropogenic soils. Anthropogenic means that people built these soils. You know anything about Amazon? It's a very thin soil type. All the biomass is above ground, but these particular soil types are full of organic matter. And that organic matter has been stabilized because of the biochar that they used. And also we have mollisoils again, this is created soils by native people because, and this may be a little controversial in the scientific literature, but up to 50% of the carbon in these soils across the Midwest is pyrogenic and stable. I didn't get there just by lightning strikes and burning of the prairie. It was active management, they think, of native peoples were managing these ecosystems for quite a long time before contact with Europeans. And, you know, this is a modern day picture of just a localized burn, just to give you a sense of what it might look like. If you do this slow enough and it's not too hot, you can actually get pretty decent charcoal. The best charcoal is coming from hardwood, though. Hardwood produces a more stable carbon. So our use in their crop production is for about 4 or 5 years now. It's been the foundation to our soil fertility. We're using as our primary fertility source right now is Charlie's compost. He's out of Owensboro. There's a product that is a 423. It's poultry litter, biochar, and a feather meal. We're saying it's about 10% biochar by weight. And he's got some great pictures, side-by-sides of tobacco there, side-by-sides of cabbage, side-by-sides of transplants. Interesting to any farmers in the room, I'm sure, would be the economics of those char. So we pay $175 per ton for the 423. And we have to figure out what the percent available nitrogen is. So there's some question about that, exactly where the percent available nitrogen falls. And we spread it about 2 to 3 tons to the acre. So we're actually needing to supplement P and K for some crops, and we are, but this nitrogen question for the biochar and Charlie's compost specifically is difficult to answer because the literature is showing that for every pound of biochar that you're using in a chicken house, let's say for bedding, it can absorb about a half a pound of ammonia. So that's shocking numbers to me. I don't know if a lot of organic agriculture is dependent on conventional chicken production, unfortunately, but that's where we're getting a lot of our fertility. If we can put biochar in the house, it's going to improve bird health, worker health, and long-term soil health. Charlie is actively doing that in his operation there in Owensboro. So we're adding about 400 to 600 pounds of biochar per acre per year. What's the upper limit? Should have showed this picture earlier, but this kind of shows you the terra preta in the Amazon that I was talking about. These are, again, soils made by humans. The native clay is not got a lot of organic matter in it, but you can see by adding this charcoal through Swidden agriculture, it's called, you're able to build up that permanent organic matter. These soils are 800 years old that they're finding, 800 years old at a minimum. So, you know, carbon sequestration, I probably wouldn't go into this because this is such a hard question to answer. You know, soil organic carbon, it's very difficult. Scientists struggle to measure, quantify. The one thing I will say is that biochar is not just like regular organic matter, it's a recalcitrant carbon. So it's not burning off every time you till. It can't burn off at the same rate. So we're fixing a lot of carbon. I'm not saying that is, you know, all permanent soil carbon, but it's got a long-term shelf life in the soil. So using it in animal production, I talked a little bit about that with Charlie's operation. This is the publication showing about every 1 pound of litter can absorb up to half a pound of ammonia. We're starting to use it in our cattle bedding for the winter. I finally got the first load of charcoal on our farm, and we've used it in small quantities before in our poultry operation, but we're increasing that as well. Again, we're not making huge volumes of compost, but it's definitely a benefit to the animals, as I said, for animal health, soil health. So you can produce heat and electricity when you make it. This is just for further research. Maybe people can, I'll drop that in the chat maybe later. People can look this up. People are actively making charcoal while at the same time heating their greenhouses, their houses. you can produce electricity from this heat exchange as well. So our second practice is a combination practice of plasticulture and annual ryegrass. It's not a new thing, obviously. People do this in organic agriculture all the time. I did say we'd never do plasticulture on our farm. The benefits of black and white plastic are obviously to soil temperature and controlling the water, which we have suffered tremendously by not controlling the water and the microbursts that we've had. So yeah, it's shedding the excess water and limiting evaporation. Obviously, it's got a huge problem not being a renewable resource. And there's no approval for biodegradable plastic under the NOP USDA organic program. So it's a lot of waste. And we consider this a transitional technology, but we're definitely using it now. The ryegrass in between is actually not to be overlooked. I consider the ryegrass to be the highlight of this particular practice because we're even raising potatoes on plastic right now because I've lost too many potato crops to July rains now. Annual ryegrass is a cover crop. Well, just the general benefits everybody knows. It's a great erosion preventer. It's scavenging in. It builds organic matter. It has an enormous root mass, but it actually breaks down a little faster than winter rye when you use it in a fairly quick rotation for annual vegetables. But this is the main part for me. It is penetrating the fragipan and is dissolving the fragipan chemically, probably at a rate of 1 to 2 inches a year. There's some negatives there, which, going back to the fragipan, this is research being done by, well, I think he's retired now, but Lloyd Murdoch is the primary extension, UK's primary extension person around this issue of fragipans. And they've done a SARE grant for 15 years on studying the effects on ryegrass on fragipan. And they are showing that when you do a control, and when you do annual ryegrass, those roots are actually getting into the fragipan, and every part of the root exudate is capable of taking an aluminized fragipan, which I forgot to mention, specific type that we have, aluminized fragipan, and breaking it down so that you're deepening your soil. It's not super fast. The actual field test they've done through your SARE grant, you know, a guy in Illinois in about 15 years of conventional agriculture was able to deepen his topsoil about 30 inches, and they think that's absolutely the maximum rate. But he was farming on 15 inches of topsoil, now he's down to 45 inches by using ryegrass every year on a fragipan. The economics are pretty straightforward of annual ryegrass. I mean, it's worth it probably even if you're not getting the benefits of the fragipan. We do mow it in between. Plasticulture economics, those are also widely available. Not going to spend too much time there. So our third practice is tiling and water harvesting. So we have to pay a lot of attention to the direction we put our beds and run them so that they run slightly downhill. They can't stop in a swale because the water will pond there for us. So there's a few spots on the farm we've strategically placed black ADS pipe underground just above the fragipan in order to get it to drain. We did this ourselves with trencher, and we didn't hire it out. Feel pretty good about it. We've done only about 1,500 feet of it on the farm. The other big picture here is, you know, we want to capture as much water as those microbursts of rain will give us. So as we're kind of spread out across these 3 fields here, we are focused on, the red outline is our 3 main ponds. And this one was already established in 2010 as a real good deep pond holding about almost 400,000 gallons. These were just old cattle ponds that had been historically just filled in over time. But we had a water line, which we had run to our pack shed here, that is municipal water on a 2-inch line. And initially we started using that for irrigation purposes, and even, you know, getting the best rate possible, that adds up quick. So we quickly realized we needed to work on our surface water, and just the investment in these ponds There's the direction of the raised beds I mentioned. We're trying to avoid this with the direction of the raised beds. But just the investment in these ponds and spreading the manure, the muck out of the bottom of them for fertility. We were able to install, this is a picture of our filter that we put in the middle of the pond. It's just a barrel filled with 57 gravel with a standpipe in it, with a bunch of holes drilled through it. And then where the pipe goes through the dam, filled with bentonite clay with a little bit of tar around the pipe to make sure that the bentonite sticks. But yeah, the economics of tiling and pond rehab are definitely going to be worth it if you're having to pay for water. You know, if you've got a good free water source nearby that's running water, that's like probably the ideal. But we were able to dig out these ponds and get, you know, an additional 600,000 to 700,000 gallons of capacity. So over 1 million gallons of total capacity now for about $3,200. That was the equivalent to like 1 month water bill in the height of summer when we had increased our scale. If you do the tiling yourself, it's very economical. If you hired somebody to do it, it's going to be more expensive, obviously, but yeah, it's hard to determine the payback on that. We know that we're getting less of this ponding that you see here in the areas that are prone to that. So the last practice, which again, not an expert here, but covered production, high tunnels. We're building as many as we can with NRCS grants. You know, cost is an issue. Even without an NRCS grant, a high tunnel can pay for itself very easily. You get higher crop quality because you have more control. This one's kind of just a no-brainer. This is us building high tunnels. We built, so far, we've got about 5 that are 30 by 96, most of them. And one of them's a gutter connect, as you can see here, that we put two side by side. And this is in order to get a tomato crop, early tomatoes, lettuce. But, you know, you've got these 4 practices, but my big picture takeaway from what I imagine agriculture being for our farm in the long term is that we're transitioning these worn out pastures into high quality vegetable ground initially. We can do that with biochar, with cover crops, with organic methods that we're already using. And we need to make a profit and build the soil at the same time while we're doing that. But transition those fields incrementally into a perennial woody crop agriculture. You know, that is, to me, is going to be the gold standard. So we just have to decrease our tillage in the long term as a culture, as a human species. And we're trying to do experiments here as much as we can, because it's difficult to see the payback on this right now. And it's also difficult to pay for it with just vegetable production. So, you know, we've got a few acres. This is a bad picture because I don't have a great picture. These are trees. There's some apples and hazels, chestnuts, and asparagus beds in between that. So this is our 2 acres of mixed perennial production that we don't do any more annual production on. This was just after we raised the asparagus beds up and then planted a low-growing clover in there. Another not great picture. Sorry about those. Yeah, and I'm trying to learn as much as we can about tree agriculture. So I'm looking forward to Matt Wilson's got a presentation later about, I think it's maybe tomorrow or the next day. I'm sure Brooks may have dropped that in there about what that looks like in Kentucky. I'm trying to learn how to graft. Every year I do a few grafts. This is a pear tree, which actually I need to take the side by side. This little scion here has become this. Took over the tree. I was able to cut the tree off here, and you wouldn't believe this is just a good old-fashioned Bradford pear that everybody has in all those neighborhoods. You know, now it's grafted to a fruit that should bear something delicious. Bradford pear is probably a great rootstock for a lot of these edible pear varieties.
Hey,
and
Adam,
lastly,
this is Brooke. You got 5 minutes left for content and then Q&A.
Okay, I'm probably gonna wrap up there, Brooke.
Okay,
This
yeah.
is just kind of my final slides. You know, as we're doing this work, it's the most important thing to us to stay connected to people who are doing this work and bringing people to the land. So, you know, just wanted to be that as the kind of wrap up for my presentation, because, you know, we have to stay connected to our history. We have to stay connected to each other in order to move this forward. And yeah, thank you all for attending, listening. If there's any questions, I can start to take them now. And,
Yeah, we got all types of questions.
Okay. Cool.
Thanks so much for that. And before we get into the questions, just in case folks do hop off, I want to point out that there were a lot of resources mentioned that Adam mentioned, and Jenny was dropping them into the chat. So be sure to open up that chat. I'm going to name a few here and we can get them maybe back in there again. There was the web soil survey is a great resource if you don't know your soil type. That's a USDA NRCS link, and it's a really great source. There's another resource that someone mentioned, a UC Davis resource, soil map.
There you go.
Too,
yeah.
That's in there. And so those are two really good resources. If you're farming, check them out, know your soils. And also there was an ATRA publication on biochar. That's a great one. We dropped that in there. And the black carbon link that Adam mentioned, we dropped that in there. So be sure to check those out as great go-to resources for more information. Okay, let's see, where do we want to start? We'll do some quick, just logistic questions about specific parts of the presentation. On your tunnel, do you have 2 layers of plastic or just one?
All our tunnels are just pretty basic. Yeah, single layer plastic tunnels on all of ours. And we have a double layer on our propagation greenhouse, but not any of the just high tunnel.
Okay. Did you ever give it a try doing your own biochar, making your own biochar?
I've done a few like very crude things, and you can build backyard kilns. I'm sure those are out there. I mean, we are installing a gasifier currently, which I didn't get a picture of because it's a wood furnace to heat our greenhouse and our new brooder house that we're working on, and it will provide some heat for the home as well. And our hope is that if we tinker with that enough, you know, a wood gasifier is a highly efficient wood stove, right? So it's burning upwards of 70–80%, hopefully even higher efficiency than just a regular outdoor boiler, which people have seen with all the smoke billowing out, right? Those are 40% efficient or less. But a wood gasifier is trapping those gases and sending them back down into the firebox to burn off they're called pyrolytic gases. And you burn those off in order to gain more heat through the system, and also create less pollution, because what goes out has very little particulate. As you're gasifying something, you're creating charcoal as well, because you're driving off those wood gases first, and what's left is the carbon matrix, which becomes charcoal if you stop the process at the right time. So I'd like to figure out, maybe this gasifier, this outdoor boiler, we could stop the process at the right time. I can pull some biochar out. Or charcoal, sorry. Charcoal is what we're pulling out of that. It becomes biochar after it's charged biologically. That's kind of what I frame it. But I have just, you know, tinkered a little bit. We bought 25 tons of charcoal from this lump charcoal plant a month ago. So that was our first big investment in using charcoal in our livestock production.
Wonderful. Okay, do you use any mixtures with the ryegrass in between the beds, or are you just going straight rye?
We've tried some crimson clover before. It's mostly straight rye. And you know, when we mix it in as a field cover crop, we definitely add crimson clover. I haven't done a lot of field mixtures in between plastic culture though, mostly just mixing when I'm doing an entire field in cover crop.
And you're just mowing to manage that?
Right. We have a Grillo bush hog, which does a great job in between plastic beds, up and back, to mow that. Yeah.
Okay. Going back to the charcoal, how much did 25 tons cost?
Yeah, so you got to
if you
factor
don't
in.
mind.
Yeah, raw cost at the plant was like $60 a ton. I think I ended up having to pay about 30 to 35. I have to look at my records to get a total, and that was for shipping. The 30 to 35 for shipping. So, you know, $95 a ton at least. And gonna say that it's going to be a component of our compost. So I think that makes it, you know, if it's 10 or 20% of the compost we plan to make, then that cost gets spread out significantly. And it's not going anywhere. So we've got a pile of it. I expect it will last us a couple of years, but it was mostly expensive because of shipping.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking just about like in the context of changing climate, are there particular crop varieties that that you've selected based on changing climate? And particularly, you know, I'm just thinking about that increase in the low temperature on average. What are you seeing there in terms of your crop selection that's performing better? Or is that, how much of a factor is that? Or is this just a need for us to have more regionalized seed sourcing?
I mean, I'm not a seed expert or a variety expert. I think generally that type of weather shift is just creating more disease in the field that I see. You know, tomatoes, outdoor tomato production is a nightmare where we are, right? Most people who try that know that it's very difficult to get a good outdoor tomato. So we have shifted away from growing heirloom tomatoes, which we did when we were much smaller. That was a big thing. We've kind of had to let that one go in order to raise more hybrids so that we can have the disease resistance built in, or not built in, but bred into the seeds. That I think that's the critical pressure in terms of seeds. You know, everybody wants to talk about taste and everything, and that's great and important. And in backyard gardens, I'd say that is the number one thing. But in terms of production-based agriculture, I think disease resistance is going to be very top of the list.
Great. There are, okay. I have a couple questions just about funding for some of these things you've done. I know you highlighted a few sources of funding early on, but I couldn't recall, did you all receive a value-added producer grant?
Right, yeah, that was
if
a
you want to
secondary one, yeah.
Talk about that a little bit and what that helped you with, and what that process was like and who helped with that process.
Right.
And then also, did you do the on-farm water program grant through?
Yes.
Yeah, if you want to maybe talk about those those are great resources, one for everyone and the other just for folks in Kentucky, but.
Right. Let's talk about, we just did the on-farm water grant last year, 2020. And we kind of got in on the tail end of them funding ponds. I was going to go back, and you can do it every year. It's through the Kentucky Ag Development Board. I think if you just look on on-farm water management, I think that will, and the Kentucky Ag Development Board, that will, you'll be able to find it there. They're smaller grants, you know, $10,000 and less. So it's accessible to smaller growers, I think. We got it for pond improvement. They will pay for pump installation and micro sprinklers and irrigation equipment. If you're improving irrigation efficiency, they will definitely pay you for that. And yeah, Kentucky is a rich state for grants. And so I found out about that one, was new to me last year. But, you know, we've also have the CAPE grant at the county level, which we've used for as well. I'm sure people know about that. There, Jenny dropped in the on-farm water management grant. Value-added producer is a much bigger deal for us than I kind of glossed over in the financing part. Yeah, and the only reason we knew about that and were able to actually apply for it is because of KCARD, the Kentucky Center for Agriculture and Rural Development, and they do a fantastic job in the state of supporting small farms. If anybody's on there from there, you know, definitely want to shout out.
I'll add that KCARD has a pre-recorded session that was on Tuesday in the agenda if y'all want to see that. And Olivia was with us. She did a pre-recorded session there about determining markets that are a right fit for your farm. So you can find out more about that specifically there, but K-Card is available for all types of other resources. So you can learn more about it at that session.
And yeah, we were able to access K-Card for the business planning in 2015 when we were scaling up the CSA, and they helped us create a 3-year financial plan. And also kind of at the end of that 3-year plan, we went ahead and went for the value-added producer grant for to create another 3-year business plan. And they specifically are paying for supplies in order to increase the CSA program for us. So if you're organic and you're needing marketing support in terms of getting yourself out there, we were able to get on the radio, NPR ads, different things like that, because of support from the value added producer grant. And K-Card really helped us. They told us about the grant and showed us how to apply and made it easier than it would have been to manage. So that was a big funding opportunity as well, apart from the traditional one.
Great. And Equip, of course, for your high tunnels was through NRCS. And we had I'm just going to share that we had a great session with Jennifer Walzer from the NRCS state office first thing yesterday morning. So there's going to be a recorded session there for anyone who doesn't know if you don't know your local agent through NRCS, reach out, develop that relationship. They also have incredible programs and funding available for farms. Have you all done anything other than the high tunnels, Adam, with NRCS?
One thing I'll tell people is we got a high tunnel gutter grant. So you can, if you want to save the water off of your high tunnel and use it back as irrigation in the high tunnel, NRCS has a program for that. They will also help you with the tile and swales and those type of things. We didn't use them for the stuff that we have done, but that's definitely a program they do. So yeah, absolutely right, Brooke. Get to know your NRCS person, and first thing they're going to have you do is create an on-farm water management plan, which, if you're going to apply for any of the programs, you're going to need that. But also I think it's probably a good practice to understand your soil type and, what you need to be thinking about in terms of water management. Where are your resources, where are your challenges? Because water is, in climate change, water and temperature are the two, those are the two things.
Mm-hmm. They also have programs that can help you with pollinator habitat install, agroforestry measures, woodland management. I mean, it's like everything. So you can get and anyone that's interested in organic transition and having a whole conservation plan for an organic system, the CAP 138 plan is what you're after. So it's a great resource. Reach out to your agent if you can. So, and Adam, it seems like you'll have accessed all the funding options. It's
yeah,
great.
I mean, it's kind of a part-time job if you're, trying to fund your farm to look at all these different available programs. And like I said, K-Card is a good place to start. They have an email that reminds you of grant application dates and opportunities to just get on that list.
Well,
Olivia just posted as well that, they're not funding ponds going forward. And I remember hearing that. But check out the other things, improve irrigation efficiency is probably the #1 thing that I would say to look into.
So the other thing, just as a funding source, we haven't mentioned it yet, Kentucky State University has the Small Farmer Grant Program as well. And so that's that can be used for like cool bots or smaller equipment purchases. And I know a lot of farmers use that. So I'm being reminded here, Adam, that we need to plug the field day that's coming up, the Oak Field Day that's happening at Barr Farms. So if y'all want to see, hopefully, Barr Farms in person, but potentially virtually, it's all a little TBD, September 30th of this year, Oak is partnering with Adam and Ray to do a farm field day. So for those of you that want to see it in person, join us then in person or virtually. We'll see. Okay, I've lost my, let's see. We have 5 more minutes for questions. So if you have any more questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat there. I have a couple here. This question starts with, if you're comfortable sharing this. This is from Connie. Thanks, Connie. You mentioned that one goal when you scaled up was for your family to be able to have a middle-class income on the farm. Can you reflect a little bit on where you are with that, how you're feeling with that goal now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, you know, scale is all relative. It's what everybody, I mean, I think you can do a much smaller business and tillage operation or whatever than we have and perhaps achieve that income level, but you really have to do a lot of value added, I think, in order to do that, whether that's organic or, actually changing your products into something edible. So we've looked at more value added in order to scale back again and do less vegetable production, just because that is a limiting factor for us is land and the type of land that we have. So yeah, I feel like it's about business management. If you want to be making a middle class income, it's 100% business management. I feel like our soils created crop losses that hurt our plan, and that's why I'm here talking about this now, because it's our limiting factor. So running up against that limiting factor, I don't know exactly how to answer that. We're not quite there yet. Everybody wants to be saving for their kids' college and giving them opportunities. And as parents of young children, that is, a big challenge for us, and we want to save for our retirement at the same time. So we're not doing that to the fullest extent we would like to, I would say that. And perhaps that's the challenge of, being a business of this size right now, even with access to the grants and everything, and scaling up whatever we've been making outside of what we need for the family, we reinvest back in the business right now. And I see that as, that's a decision we make every year, and we're trying to figure out what scale we need to be at. That ever expansive growth is not a thing I believe in. So I think we're getting there to the scale we need to be at. It's really hard to match production, market, labor needs, and all these things, and be the main people deciding all these factors. It's a complicated business. So yeah, I think we're comfortable, but we'd like to be saving more money and living that middle class dream, right?
Okay. What's the slope that you're putting in your rows in so that the water drains? There are a couple comments about how people always heard you have to put your beds on contour. So what's that slope you're using?
No, that's a great question. I heard that too. And when we put our beds on contour, we created the ponds that you saw Cedar playing in. Beds on contour do work in certain situations. I still think you need to have a drainage plan. If you hit a swale in the low part in the field and the bed's not following the contour there, because it's difficult to do if you're doing tractor-based agriculture. In our case, that's going to be a pond. In other people's cases, it'll drain a lot faster, but we're looking at about 3, 4, 5% is about as much as I'm comfortable with in terms of getting if we're trying to get the bed to drain, I need that much slope to get the water to flow out of the bed, because when it doesn't percolate through the soil, that means it runs across the top of the soil, right? Or it runs through that topsoil layer. So we need it to run away from the vegetables when it's going too fast and not sit. So yeah, it's going to be an application that everyone, looks at for their own farm. Try it out.
Well, and on that note, Sarah asks, she says they're having a lot of issues with standing water and just started adding some trenches. Were there any specific resources that you found helpful as you were exploring options? The how-to guide, or here are the list of options. Or like for tiling specifically, what were the go-to resources that you had?
Tiling, okay, so our go-to resources when it comes to managing these type of soils are the local farmers around us, the conventional guys. Make friends with your conventional neighbors is my number one tip. They got the equipment, they got the experience, they've been doing it. And so we talked to our neighbor about what that looks like for him. There's a guy who has a tile plow who farms 1,500 acres of corn and soybeans. So tile plow is a machine that'll put that slotted tile in the ground. He's had that machine for 6 years. And he's been looking for the perfect dry window to put in tile, but has never put a drop in, because he's saying when you put tile in and it's wet, it will create a smeared layer around the edge of the trench, and that smeared layer won't let the water go through. So you have to put the tile plow in when the soil is dry enough to break through that. And so I listened to that advice, but I also couldn't wait however long he's waiting, because he says it'll take a couple years before the water will get into that trench. And yeah, that's probably true. And that's my biggest resource, is the local neighbors. I mean, you can look up different technologies they have. You can put a sock over your tile, you can put a tile in gravel, or you can just put perforated pipe straight in the ground, and it won't have as long of a lifetime, but the cost is about half of what the other technologies have. So
Thanks for that. We could do this all day, Adam, but I'm looking at the time and we're already a minute over. And this is the part of the day when we have a really tight schedule. So I'm going to have to say thank you and wrap it up. I felt like we got to the end of the questions. And Connie acknowledges this in the chat. She just says, thanks so much. It's all so complicated and we're so impressed. And I have to echo that. I think that's, you're dealing with a lot of complicated, very interconnected issues. And I'm just so grateful for your time and expertise sharing the whole story with us. And we shared a lot of great resources with everyone here. So catch it on the recording or in the chat, all those links.